Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and attendees. We are beginning the panel session for the defense of the thesis by Artem Alsufyev. The thesis is submitted in conformity with the requirements set forth for the academic degree of the candidate of science in economics. The specialization is 080005, Economics and Management of the National Economy Management. The topic is Approaches to Personal Training and Development of Innovation-Driven Companies in the BRIC countries, by Rector's Order number 5715/1, as of the 8th of June 2018, I, Professor Vera Minina, Doctor of Sociology, Professor of the Department of Sociology of Culture and Communication, St. Petersburg State University, was appointed Chair of the Dissertation Board. Allow me to introduce my colleagues, members of the Dissertation Board, who are present here in the hall with me, and those who are present remotely. To the left of me, Professor Svetlana Gureva, Doctor of Psychology, Professor of the Department of Social Psychology, St. Petersburg State University. Professor Evgenia Barabanova, Doctor of Sociology, Professor of the Faculty of Social Sciences, National Research University Higher School of Economics. Remotely, we have Professor Larissa Smirnych, Doctor of Economics, Associate Professor, Professor of the Department of Applied Economics, National Research University Higher School of Economics. We also have Khalil Durrani, Doctor of PhD in Economics, Texas A&M University, the United States of America. Under the federal law, as of the 23rd of May 2016, on amending Article 4 of the Federal Law on Science and State Scientific and Technical Policy, St. Petersburg State University is entitled to confer its own academic degrees. The corresponding order on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University was issued on the 1st of September 2016. Its number is 6821/1. According to this order, the panel discussion is valid, provided 2/3 of the appointed board members are present. The total number is not to be fewer than 4 people. The dissertation board today consists of 5 people, 5 of which are present, including 2 board members who are attending the defense remotely via Skype. I hope that we will not have any technical issues during the defense with those members who have joined us remotely. So therefore, we have a quorum. Let us begin, ladies and gentlemen. The panel discussion cannot exceed 2 hours, and now let me announce the agenda. Item 1, the chairman's presentation about the documents submitted by the candidate for the degree and their conformity with the requirements. And chairman's replies to questions, if any, no more than 5 minutes. Item 2, the candidate's presentation providing an overview and findings of the research, no more than 20 minutes. Item 3, questions to the candidate regarding his presentation, no more than 2 minutes for each question, and the candidate's reply to the questions. Item 4, chair's overview of the submitted reports on the thesis. As all the external reports were duly posted on the official SPBU website, only critical remarks and questions will be read out, no more than 10 minutes. Item 5, reports on the thesis by the board members. They are requested to provide their viewpoints, critical remarks, questions, and recommendations, no more than 10 minutes per one person. Item 6, chair's report on the thesis. Item 7. The candidates' comments about the reports on the thesis, no more than 15 minutes. Item 8. Questions from the audience and open discussion. The floor will be given to the non-board attendees. They can give a brief account of their ideas and/or ask questions to the candidate about the research. No more than 5 minutes per one person. Let me note that it's necessary to fill in the registration form and give their full name before the talk. Item 9. The candidates' comments about the talks given by non-members of the board, no more than 5 minutes. Item 10. Presentation of the candidate's thesis supervisor, no more than 3 minutes. Number 11. A 5-minute break before the open balloting on conferring or non-conferring the academic degree. The discussion of the results of the defense is not broadcast. Item 12. Open balloting, vote counting and recording the results in the minutes of the session. Item 13. Deciding upon conferring or not conferring the academic degree. And finally, item 14, the candidate's closing speech, no more than 2 minutes. Before we proceed with the agenda, I kindly ask you to switch off your mobile phones. The panel session of the Dissertation Board is being recorded and broadcast on the Internet. It is also interpreted into English. We also provide interpretation from English into Russian. So let me proceed with the agenda. The first item is the chair's overview of the documents submitted by the candidate. Thesis by Artem Alsufyev was submitted in conformity with the requirements for the academic degree of the candidate of science in economics, specialization 080005, economics and management of the national economy. The topic is approaches to the personnel training and development of innovation-active companies in the BRIC countries. It was approved for defense by the relevant order of the SPBU Academic Secretary. The Dissertation Board was set up by the order of the SPBU Academic Secretary as of the 8th of June 2018, number 5715/1. I have already introduced the board members to you. The candidate has submitted the following documents to the SPBU Academic Secretary. Number 1, an application to Professor Nikolai Kropochev, Rector of St. Petersburg University, on the approval of the thesis for defense, submitted September the 7th, 2017. Number 2, report of the academic supervisor, Professor Elena Zavyalova, Doctor of Psychology, Professor of the Department of Organizational Behavior and Personnel Management at St. Petersburg State University. Number 3, list of published works containing 10 items, which describe the research findings. 3 works have been published in peer-reviewed journals recommended by the Ministry of Education and Science. Number 4, letter of verification as of the 4th of September 2017, issued by St. Petersburg State University and certifying that Artem Alsufyev was enrolled in a postgraduate course at St. Petersburg University. His specialization was 080005, economics and management of national economy. It also certifies that he passed 3 qualifying exams in History and Philosophy of Science, Foreign Language, and Economics and Management of the National Economy. Number 5, a university diploma from Novosibirsk State University, which issued on the 19th of June 2012, qualification, economics, specialization, accounting and audit. Then a thesis in Russian and English, a printed version with the manuscript copyright and a digital copy. The thesis formatting and reference list comply with the Russian state standard. The above-mentioned documents comply with Item 12 of Section 3 of the Order on Granting Academic Degrees in St. Petersburg State University. Ladies and gentlemen, do you have any questions concerning the documents submitted by the candidate? If there are no questions, let us proceed with the agenda. And the floor is given to Artem Alsufyev with his report on the major results of his study. Distinguished Chair, members of the Dissertation Board, dear attendees, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Artem Alsufyev. Today I'm going to report on my research. My specialization is Economics and Management of National Economy. The topic is Approaches to Personal Training and Development of Innovation Active Companies in the BRIC countries. The thesis was written at the Department of Organizational Behavior and Personnel Management. My academic advisor is Professor Elena Zavyalova, Doctor of Psychology. At present, the most urgent task for companies is the development of the innovation ability. It's a key source of sustainable competitive advantage. The main subject of research in this area is a search for tools to stimulate and foster innovation. Among modern practices of human resource management, personnel training and development practices have a special place. They should be regarded as the most crucial tools for achieving the goals of activating innovation in companies. However, in practice, these tools are not used effectively enough. Often obsolete and too traditional approaches used to train personnel, and personal training is often regarded as a cost. The identification of approaches that meet modern requirements of innovation development is very important for the group of innovation active companies. When considering the relations between approaches to human resource management in innovation activity, Western researchers are mainly focused on a generalized indicator of the human resource management system. They consider personnel training and development only as part of the overall HRL system. The lack of empirical research and evidence of the existence of relationship between approaches to personal training and development and the level of innovation leads to the use of traditional schemes to enhance innovation. This is done on the principle of best practices. Thus, the relevance of the present study is defined by the need to develop theoretical principles of training and development as a tool to increase company innovation. And it seems important from the point of view of practical applicability to consider what specific principles, policies and practices of personal training and development are connected with the results of the company's innovation activity. The tasks of fostering innovation activity by personal training and development practices are especially relevant for the companies of the BRIC countries. Literature overview shows that the authors of most studies in this area focus on the developed countries. Thus, the empirical cross-country comparison in the area of innovation activity and training and development can be assessed as extremely relevant, especially when it comes to the BRIC countries. Thus, the purpose of the dissertation is to prove the impact of approaches to personnel training and development on the innovation activity of companies in Brazil, Russia, India, and China on the basis of cross-country comparison. We focused on innovation-driven middle and major companies in the BRIC countries. The subject of the study were approaches to personnel training and development and how they impact innovation of these companies in the BRIC countries. I define the approach to personnel training and development as a general strategic orientation of the choice of principles, policies, and practices of personnel training and development, which is in line with modern conceptualization approaches in human resource management and the relevant studies. I followed certain logic when conducting my study. First of all, I defined the role of personnel training and development in theory and practice of human resource management. I've developed a classification of major approaches to human resource training and development. Personnel training and development is defined as a functional area of human resource management aimed at developing knowledge, skills, and abilities of employees and incorporates a set of measures aimed at achieving company goals. Management architecture can be viewed as a pyramid with 3 levels: principles, policies, and practices. They can also be viewed as 3 dimensions. This framework construction was used as a theoretical concept, but we also based our empirical part of the study upon this conceptualization. We have introduced a lot of effort to systematize and substantiate benefits which personnel training and development brings. We focused on 34 empirical works which tackle this issue from a number of viewpoints and criteria. They use different methodology, methods of data collection, approaches to the calculation of various variables. They focus on different countries. We used questionnaires as a way to collect data. We also measured innovative activity using different variables. When we analyzed theoretical approaches, we developed a conceptual model, which includes the effects of moderation and mediation, as well as practices of personal training and development on innovation activity. It turned out that it's important to consider contextual factors or environment when we study the impact of human resource training and development on innovation. As I said, we focused on the BRIC countries. In this table, you can see a number of criteria we managed to find out. Approaches to personnel training and development are defined by multiple factors. They can be combined into sets, such as external and organizational factors. The first one are institutional factors, while the external factors are cultural factors. We used several methods. For example, cluster analysis based on fuzzy sets. It shows how actively companies in the BRIC countries use approaches to personal training. Qualitative analysis is a positive approach. This method was used in quite a big number of publications which reported the results of similar studies. This method is seldom used in Russia, and I'm aware of only one study in my country which used a similar methodology. The empiric research was used with a team from Graduate School of Management from St. Petersburg State University. We also had some people who joined from São Paulo University and some other higher education institutions. The methodology was developed in the Illinois University. It allowed to estimate approaches to human resource management, in particular practices of training and personnel development. We used the so-called structured interview. We also focused on the values or indicators of innovative activity. Innovative companies were chosen on the basis of the Oslo manual, which provides necessary recommendations to conduct the research of this kind. For Russian companies, we focused on the works by Russian scholars, for example, Professor Zavyalova. The effectiveness of research and development costs, the share of scientific and technical personnel from the average number of the organization, the number of patents and patent applications. So these are some of the criteria that Russian scholars use to identify the level of innovation in a company. We conducted a large-scale empirical study of approaches to personnel management and development in innovative companies of the BRIC countries. The approaches to training and development included principles, policies, and practices, which you can see on this slide. Approaches to human resource training and development were combined into sets. Innovation activity variables were as follows: share of innovation products in the total volume of shipped products, and the number of patents in the last 2 years and patent applications in the last 2 years. Here you can see preliminary assessment of the effectiveness of approaches to training and development of the leading companies from the BRIC countries. There are 4 clusters for each country. We conducted preliminary evaluation for all the 4 clusters to see how these companies in these clusters using the approaches to personal training and development. At the next stage of the study, it was a multi-criterial comparative analysis based on fuzzy sets. We provide a classification of 12 approaches to personal training and development from the BRIC countries. Here we see highly active innovations in the companies. We focused on numerous criteria here for each model. We focused on the coverage coefficient so that to provide the most relevant results. We have identified how approaches to personal training and development affect companies' innovativeness by country. We also tried to figure out which factors affected the results specific for each country. Major theories that we used are the isomorphism theory, the theory of path dependence, resource-based view, which view people as the key asset, and the theory of cultural dimensions. We have proved that there is a link between approaches to human resource training and development and the level of innovativeness. This link is affected by environmental country and country-specific features. In Brazil, they focus on the generalist approach. In India, they regard training as an investment. Russia tries to provide company-specific knowledge and active induction programs. In China, they actively finance into training programs. After all, we have developed a generalized conceptualization model, which you can see on the slide. It shows how approaches to human resource training and development impact companies' innovations. It shows how all the factors, including institutional and external factors, affect approaches to training practices. The theoretical value of the study is that we have made a contribution into the relevant field of knowledge, and I would say we have definitely enlarged concepts and major theories in this field. The practical value lies in the recommendations which we have developed. They can be applied by Russian companies. Major results of the study can also be used in training courses in universities and colleges. Major research findings were discussed at the monthly meetings of the Department of Organizational Behavior and Human Resource Management at the Graduate School of Management and St. Petersburg State University, and I have also reported at several important international conferences. I have published 10 works. 3 of them were published in the journals recommended by the Ministry of Science. Thank you. Are there any questions to the candidate? In your dissertation, you mentioned the results of cluster analysis conducted in 4 countries. Does this empirical data allow to describe the profile of countries, or rather I would say companies, Russian companies, who are the leaders in education and who are the so-called outsiders in the personal training and development? What can you say here? Thank you for your question. I have developed 12 typologies of approaches to personal training and development. Talking about country profiles, we can focus on countries who have leading positions in personal training and development. We can focus on that using the mean values which we obtained when analyzing these approaches and practices. So if we analyze these flagship companies, we will see that in Russia, these leaders in human resource training and education, the results they show, they're very, very close to what we have obtained as a result of the empirical study. They try to provide company-specific knowledge. They conduct active induction programs. We also analyzed their innovative indicators, focusing on such things as the number of patents, for example. So I would say Russian companies have average level of innovative activity. So we couldn't say that those companies who invested most into human resource training and development were not the leaders in innovation. We also tried to consider sectoral specifics. However, it was not always possible to consider this issue. Surprisingly enough, leaders in training, as a result of cluster analysis, showed similar results in comparative analysis. Do you find the answer satisfying? Yes, certainly, thank you. I also have a question. Can you hear me all right? Yes, Professor Arova, welcome with the question. I would partly repeat the question that was asked a minute ago. Can you tell me, please, those companies which you define as innovative, those companies which use innovative approaches to human resource approaches to personal training and development, are they anyhow different with those companies who use traditional approaches to training and development? And did you have, let me specify, were there any evidence that countries use approaches specific to their own country, and these approaches to training differ little from company to company, despite the level of innovativeness? So I'm now repeating the questions to you once again. Or I see that you made some notes, so I suppose you are ready to answer. Maybe you can also focus on some portrait or profile of these companies, some regional specifics, their location, which sector of economy do they belong to, and so on. Within my study, I focused on the link between approaches to training and the level of innovativeness. Describing their profile was actually the focus of the study. It lies the beyond of the boundaries of my research. From what I remember, leading companies also on average, on the one hand, they present quite a big share in the total sample. So in general, companies which are actively engaged in innovation are also engaged quite actively into personal training and development. They use brand new methods, approaches, practices, collaboration techniques. within the framework of cluster analysis, there were some companies which didn't fit the set. Some clusters and companies in the BRIC countries showed high results in terms of innovation, high values in terms of innovation. However, they did not invest actively into personnel training. And they were opposite examples where companies invested heavily into training, but their indicators of innovative activity were low. Well, sometimes these companies simply, kind of buy people, try to engage professionals, but not to invest into their training. Your second question was about innovation-driven and non-innovation-driven companies within one countries. Can we say that they use different methods, and can we say that innovation-driven companies within the same country use methods different from non-innovative companies? Did I understand your question all right? Yes, absolutely. We didn't have a reference group in our study. We used fuzzy sets. So in my dissertation, I write that the design of my study is a certain compromise. And we could use this I suppose that country-specific features can affect innovativeness of companies. However, companies are competing within the country. And I suppose companies strive to use innovative methods of training, and because the diffusion of innovations due to the competition they face, not only within the country, but from international companies across the world. Members of the Dissertation Board and attendees, are there any more questions?
I have a quick question.
Okay, thank you.
It's a follow-up question. Thank you so much, Artem, for the presentation, and I enjoyed reading your dissertation. My question is related, similar to what the other members asked. Did you do any analysis, or do you think there would be a difference among companies like that are you consider large versus small companies within and across countries? Like the results would be different than what you observed in your different clusters now?
As part of my study, I focused on middle and big companies with innovations. Human resource management is very special in small companies. So we didn't focus on them anyhow. Our focus was solely on average and big companies. And the assumption was that the system of personal training might be really similar in average, in middle-sized and big companies. So as part of cluster analysis or qualitative comparative analysis based on fuzzy sets, we did not focus how big the company is.
Yeah. Yeah,
This is
I'm
due to the
asking.
purpose of my research.
Yeah, I'm asking because I wonder if you would find similar results or different results between medium and large companies versus the current findings that you reported.
Профессор Дирани, не могли бы вы...
Could you please repeat your question? I failed to hear the first part of your question. I'm sorry.
No, I was wondering if there are differences across companies, not across nations, like companies that with similar sizes, for example, across different nations would have similar innovation or non-innovation practices. That's why I'm asking.
Спасибо за вопрос.
Thank you for your question. That was not the task of my study.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Но я...
I assume, still based on the theoretical part of my study, that innovation profile between countries can look similar if they have similar features when it comes to competition, innovation, export patterns. Scholars say that those companies who export their goods are subject to the diffusion of innovation. Right. And they're more likely to introduce organizational innovations as well. I hope this partly answers your question, but I based my answer only on my theoretical part of the study.
Yeah, thank you. And I encourage you to look into those questions. Maybe this could be a new publication for you. That's the question.
Thank you.
Ну и, наверное, я завершу вопросом.
I have one question in the aftermath of your report, your presentation. What do you imply by human resource management tools or instruments, as they call them? The object of my study was approaches to human resource training and development. Here we specify principles, policies, and practices. So methods or tools are actually practices. Are there any more questions from the attendees? We have one more question from Professor Orlova. On the final slide, you speak about the theoretical value of your study, and you say that the results of the study allow to further improve approaches to personal training and development in innovation-driven companies. Could you specify which approaches should be improved and how this should be done if you say this is the practical value of your study? And what is the focus? Do we focus on the Russian companies? Are these recommendations relevant only for the Russian economy? Thank you for the question. What do I mean by the improvement of approaches to human resource training and development? I mean the results of the qualitative comparative analysis based on fuzzy sets. It resulted in 12 models, in fact, approaches to personal training and development. Those which had a link with higher results and impacts on companies' innovativeness. For each country, as I said, we could specify the core factors and the additional factors, which then make 3 models to organizational approach to personal training and development. In other words, this is something that should be done to achieve high performance in this area. And this is not only true for Russia, that's true for all other countries. I mean, this obvious link between the approaches to human resource training development and the level of innovation in a company. Heads of companies should understand the importance of that and should be aware that there are different models on how they tackle the training issue. Like in Russia, active induction programs and this company-specific knowledge means that companies can get advice from me or other scholars that this is what they should do in their companies, provide specific knowledge-specific training and introduce active induction programs. I'm afraid I haven't got the proper answer to my question. Are your approaches universal for all companies across the world? Are they universal for all sectors of economy? And how companies can put your recommendations into practice? The models I've developed are not universal, of course. On the one hand, these are innovation-driven companies. On the other hand, the qualitative analysis was conducted only for product innovations. The indicator was the share of innovative products as part of the total shipped products or as part of total exported products. So for these companies can use the recommendations, and I'm sure they will be effective. Product innovations, I mean. I'd like to thank you for the answers. Let's finish with the Q&A session and proceed with the agenda. Another item is external reports. We haven't received any external reports on the CITES, so we are moving forward with the agenda and listen to the reports of the members of the Dissertation Board. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, attendees, thank you for the possibility to join the Dissertation Board. It was a pleasure to read the thesis by Artem Alsufyev, and it was really interesting. Before I speak about the advantages of this study, I'd like to say a few words about the relevance of this research. I think it's really a cutting-edge study when it comes to human resource management as a branch of science. It answers a question: how are we supposed to train personnel so that it increases company performance, it increases innovation activity of a company? What I find really attractive in this study is that on the one hand, the issue is really global and it's really huge in scale. However, Artem Alsufyev was managed to clearly state the purpose of the study and to limit by this way the scope of his research. He was really careful with the terminology. He provides definitions of all the key terms and concepts. The definitions are logical, they are well structured, they're clear-cut, and he makes a consistent use of this terminology throughout the thesis, which creates a complete research and reveals Artem Alsufyev as an experienced scholar despite his young age. I suppose Artem Alsufyev was brave enough to tackle these difficult issue. He has done a great job of analyzing literature in this area, both in Russian and English. His literature review is impressive. His literature review focuses only on the specific problematics. It's not general in character. It was really interesting to read a section of his thesis which focus on social and geographical and cultural factors of the BRIC countries. Some of the sections of his dissertation resembled an encyclopedia, and this is perhaps the greatest compliment I can give. Another thing that I appreciated is the multifaceted approach, because he covers several theoretical concepts, and it's a well-substantiated strategy to structure a study. On the other hand, when it comes specifically to human resource management, the candidate showed his attitude to different concepts. So this choice of the macro approach can be seen throughout the thesis. It's on the logical that the main focus on the theoretical parts of the study are the practices and approach to human resource training and development. The analysis is deep, it's profound, it's critical, it shows major constraints and strong points of prior research. What I liked most, it's always a pleasure when reading a dissertation to see that logically you would have done the same piece of work if you had to write on the same topic. Many theories were analyzed, such as personal competencies, personal skills, and they expected something more, and then I turned the page and I see that practices create the assets in the company, and they kind of create attitudes within the company to company culture and so on. So this multifaceted approach that the candidate used, let me repeat myself, is what I really liked in this work. The thesis is well written. It shows good formatting. I was able to see that it took really some time and effort for Artem Alsufyev to write this thesis. It's kind of a perfectionist approach, even. It also has practical value because it can become the foundation. The research findings can become the foundation for training courses for universities. I mean, huge abstracts of a thesis can turn into material for lectures. Let me turn to some critical remarks. First off, there were many interesting theories and theoretical ideas. However, not all of them then are further developed in the empirical part of the study. There was one figure that attracted my attention. I thought that was the conceptualization model. However, it wasn't, because it didn't consider all the theoretical factors you mentioned in the first sector. The database is impressive. There were 200 companies analyzed. Another strong point, as I said before, is the practical value and some particular conclusions. I mean, this country-specific conclusions and recommendations. Let me see. Some other critical remarks that I have. Number one, the so-called causality issue. Something that deals with reasons and after effects. The word impact or influence that you constantly use in your thesis. I suppose that the design of your study doesn't actually allow to straightforwardly speak about the impact. You didn't have the reference group. It was a qualitative study. So it left me with a little bit of a surprise, because the parameter you used to choose a company then turned into a variable that you use to analyze the companies. The second critical remark is about indicators and methods of data analysis. The indicators are purely abstract, subjective. So they are more telling of not what's going on in the company, but rather what experts think about what's going on. So indicators were poorly chosen. Such indicators like we pay attention to, or our employees get this and these materials. So these indicators turned into a certain limitation. That's a good recommendation to say that company-specific knowledge should be provided, but that's a very general recommendation. I disagree with the general strategy of the empirical data analysis. You have an impressive sample of 200 companies. However, you have a breakdown into sets, and then sets are broken down into clusters. And each cluster is really small. It includes a small number of companies. So it's quite inadequate and inaccurate to analyze 2 companies within one cluster. Because here you should have used a strategy of a case study analysis, but not the cluster analysis or descriptive techniques. Another remark, and this is something we already heard today in questions. Unfortunately, you did not anyhow consider regional or sectoral features. And this led to the fact that you're not able to say who are leaders within a company. So companies, after all, look very anonymous. There is nothing you can say specific about each company. And another remark is the qualitative inconsistency of practices and then recommendations. Recommendations for Russia and Brazil are really practical in the quality, but in India, you recommend to regard training programs as a long-term investment, but it's not a practice. It's a part of ideology. This is what I meant by inconsistency of recommendations. In conclusion, let me say that the majority of remarks that I have are due to the complex study that you conducted. You had to bear in mind too many factors. I am well aware of that. However, it opens up new vistas for your future research. There is much to focus on. All in all, I'd say that you have achieved the purpose, the goals, and objectives of the study. Your thesis is an independent research work, and the research findings are relevant. So the thesis of Artem Alsufyev complies with the major requirements set forth in the relevant order of St. Petersburg State University, and Artem Alsufyev can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of economics, specialization, economics and management of national economy. Thank you for the report. Would it be more convenient for you to answer questions in turns or after all the reports are read? I'd like to answer right now. I'd like to thank you for the report, for your interest in my study, for your recommendations for my future research. I agree with the critical remark you made about the impact or link. I understand that it's with caution that I have to interpret the data. In organizational studies, we always have to compromise. In one of your papers with a scholar from India, now I quote, researchers and their efforts always find certain limitations. These limitations are often due to the data, specifically open source data. Another limitation is a huge number of variables, the availability of data, the credibility of data gathered from respondents. Ours is a novel study because that's a comparative study in the BRIC countries. We strive to fully explain this phenomenon of an impact. This allowed us to kind of finalize the study through the development of recommendations. But on the other hand, it's not a linear model. I agree that I maybe should have used regressional analysis and encode the countries. But apart from qualitative analysis, our focus was to develop the methodological aspects And in modern Russian studies, the method of comparative qualitative analysis is seldom used. So one of our objectives was to kind of test this research tool, and it proved to be still quite effective. Mistakes are unavoidable. We have them in any research. When it comes to subjective indicators, this is another thing that can't be avoided. In our literature review, 80% of scholars used subjective indicators in their studies. Recommendations were developed not for clusters, but for all the companies from the sample by country. So I hope they're valid enough. Small clusters were used to identify the leaders and those who are highly engaged in the innovation process or in the training process. Indicators were highly variable, and here I agree with you. We tried to overcome this obstacle by creating the certain architecture which I specified in my presentation earlier. Yes, I agree that the recommendations for Russia and Brazil are more applicable in practice than those for China, for example, and India. Now the floor is given to Professor Guriev. You're welcome with your report. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, members of the Dissertation Board, attendees. I have analyzed the thesis by Artem Alsufyev, Approaches to Personnel Training and Development of Innovation Active Companies in the BRIC countries. The study is certainly relevant. We have an increasing interest from scholars to the issue of human resource management and training in modern companies. In general, Artem Alsufyev has raised many disputable issues. For example, which models are the most effective? What is the criterion of successful models? Are they applicable in a different culture or in a different country? Can we predict which management model should be used so that it's a working model? What is general and what is specific in this management or organizational models? The thesis answers a great many questions. It's a deep study, it's a multifaceted research, it's well thought out. It brings to mind different approaches and different paths that countries take and companies take to manage their resources. That's the for example, the Danish model on how making the personnel happy, and other interesting European approaches. What I personally find really interesting is this novel path in the studies of human resource management. I mean Artem Alsufyev's research. It seems that most board members share similar experience, so I wouldn't like to repeat what other board members said. I would only like to say that the thesis is well structured and it quotes many English sources, which is still at the forefront of the studies. What was most interesting for me personal is the cross-cultural analysis of innovations and the different approaches to the term innovation. This is given on page 7. Here I quote Russian version of the first chapter. I really liked the logic that the candidate used. It allows to regard human resource training management as a 3-level domain. This allows to further follow a vector throughout the thesis. An obvious advantage is the candidate's ability to analyze and integrate existing approaches and generate new models and concepts based on them. The content of chapter 2 is interesting from the point of view of the conceptual model that Alsufyev has developed. I mean, institutional theory, dependence theory, prior path theory, resource-based approach, all these parameters are systematized and visualized as a figure on page 53. What's interesting in chapter 3 is the large-scale research. It was a teamwork. Scholars from across the world joined the study, which is pretty impressive. And it's great that you use this unique methodology developed in the Illinois University. And the cluster approach was also of some interest. It's a well-structured thesis, it's logical, conclusions are relevant. However, the practical value lies in the recommendations. These are those models which are clearly defined, theoretical and practical value is obvious. It has obvious novelty because it's the first study of its type in the BRIC countries. It was interesting to read about the impact that approaches to training have on innovations. It's also of interest to read about cultural and regional specifics. Recommendations can be implemented in the BRIC countries and the companies there. Let me now focus on some critical aspects and shortcomings of the study. Number 1, in the theoretical part, you don't provide enough overview of works written by Russian scholars on personal training and development. Most theoretical concepts are borrowed from works and studies conducted by foreign scholars. However, this is also a popular research trend in Russia, and much has been published in recent years. My critical remark number 2, your thesis is really descriptive in character. the answers that you provide to the questions you ask in your thesis are really descriptive. Some of the aspects you stated in the theoretical chapter were not covered in the practical part of the study, maybe due to the difficulty in obtaining relevant data. All the answers you got from your respondents are based on the prior experience of company management. So this is something they did in the past. And another question which rises here: are foreign approaches and practices applicable for Russia? Still, Artem Alsufyev has done a great job. His study has achieved its purpose. It provides relevant conclusions and gives working recommendations. In conclusions, let me state that the thesis by Artem Alsufyev approaches to personal training and development of innovation-active companies in the BRIC countries complies with the major requirements set forth in the St. Petersburg State University Specialization 080005, Economics and Management of National Economy. Based on what I said, Artem Alsufyev can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of economics, specialization, economics and management of national economy. Thank you. Thank you for the report. Thank you for the critical remarks and recommendations. Still, I'd like to comment upon several aspects of which you mentioned. By and large, my theoretical part is truly based on the works by foreign scholars. This is only because we really have few scholars in Russia who are dealing specifically with this issue. These are the scholars who are present here at the defense of my dissertation. If we take Brazil, for example, then there, similar research with the same focus area is almost non-existent. Talking about the descriptive character of my study and absence of an estimation scale. This is due to the design of the study and certain limitations imposed by that. Thank you. Now, the floor is given to Professor who has joined us remotely. I would like to try not to repeat what the colleagues have already said today. Let me start by saying what I enjoyed in this study. As the topic is really relevant, in Russia, such studies are rare. However, the topic is really interesting and it's quite up to date. This reminds me of Nicholas Bloom's research about practices which affect organizational performance. And the results can be different. They can be financial, they can be social, they can be cultural, and practices of personal training and development can also be different. However, whatever time period we take, they remain exceptionally acute. Why is this research relevant for current Russian reality? What we see is that little has been done here in Russia. However, there seems to be a lot of interest across the world. So when Artem Alsufyev started dealing with this issue, he started analyzing what has been already done in this area. Hence, the amount of foreign concepts and theories in the thesis. Scholars are always vulnerable in this respect, because whatever we do can be criticized. Another advantage is the cross-country comparison. The BRIC countries were analyzed due to their certain similarity in terms of their economic growth, development, financial indicators. Despite these similarities, the countries are really different. So for me personally, that was interesting to see and compare the approaches different countries use. The results of this comparative study can really be used by companies in these countries. Or maybe they can adapt each other's experience to see if it can be effective in their local market. Artem has covered a great deal of questions and issues, and I suppose he has really achieved the purpose and objectives of the study. However, I suppose research papers, research works of this scale have to be really systematic. And this is where sometimes Artem Alsufyev tried to do more than he could do. On the one hand, this was a brave decision, but on the other hand, this gives rise to criticism and somehow affects the results of the study. Still, we have these results. I mean, the 12 basic approaches you were able to systematize. Also, I mean here major and secondary practices. These results create the, let me call it, positive contribution of your study, because this is what I find has certain practical value for companies in the countries you analyzed. Still, the study, as I've already said, is a bit of an, let me call it, academic or research exaggeration. And it has certain disadvantages, which I can combine into 3 groups. The first one, and I'm not sure if the candidate can provide a thorough answer to my criticism and the questions. I see that the candidate wasn't able to differentiate the purpose and the objectives of the study. I myself was able to find actually 2 purposes clearly written in this thesis. The first one was about to prove the impact of approaches to personal training and development on the innovation activity. And the second purpose I found on a different page was just to study the approaches to personal training and development. I might be wrong here, or I'm kind of misinterpreted your writing. Still, I suppose a study should have only one purpose and then several objectives allowing to reach this purpose. There was some inconsistent use of terminology. Such terms as innovation active companies and innovative companies, or innovative activity of employees, or innovative activity of enterprises. These are very similar wordings, but they are not identical. I would say that even innovation active companies and innovative companies are different types of companies. They are not identical. I'm sorry to use this slang saying, but you remember that devil is in the detail, and you have to be really careful with terminology. The second group of critical remarks is connected with the first one. The methodology you used in the study is complex. I would even call this intriguing, because you used qualitative methods, and the candidate said that he wanted to improve the methodology in this area of science. Methodology he used allowed to get some positive answers, but at the same time resulted in an impossibility to provide answers to certain questions. This methodology allowed to create typology and to compare practices used by different companies. However, the question about the impact of practices on innovation activity of companies, this one raises doubt, many questions, and this is where we might find inaccuracies. I can suggest there might be impact, but can we really be 100% sure that there is always this direct impact of innovations, of training on innovations? Apart from that, another methodological question. It's a question of indigeneity. I suppose we cannot say that this questions of causality can be solved, and that can be solved easily. No, they're never easy. It's a very challenging task. Nonetheless, to make the results of the study more relevant and convincing, you should have said what you tried to do to answer the questions and why you were not able to provide the answers, or which obstacles and bottlenecks did you have on the way to answer certain questions, and why did they make you fail to provide an answer. I have already asked a question today. Do the results you obtained, can the results you obtained be used by companies, in particular innovation active companies? So can they be used by other enterprises with low innovation active companies? If we take some old companies, can practices you identified foster innovation in old non-innovative companies? Do they have a chance to inject innovation if proper personal training and development programs are introduced? Maybe there is evidence that there are already some non-innovative companies who are already introducing training programs and are already moving towards innovations. Innovation active companies are not always competing companies, and they are seldom competing companies, because the word innovation suggests a novel activity, a brand new activity, something that has never been used before. In this respect, I'm not sure that you were right, that there were some limitations due to competitiveness. If companies are from different segments of market, they have different background, different approaches to management, to HR management, to training and development. So my question is, which sectors of economy do your companies operate in? Are these really competing companies, or are these companies engaged in some unique innovative activity? These are just minor details. However, it's a serious study, and I do understand that it's difficult to take into account all these minor aspects. All in all, due to what we've heard today and due to what I read in the thesis by Artem Alsufyev, Approaches to Personal Training and Development of Innovation Active Companies in the BRIC countries, complies with the major requirements set forth in the relevant order of St. Petersburg State University, and Artem Alsufyev can be awarded the academic degree of the Candidate of Economics, Specialization 080005, Economics and Management of National Economy. Thank you. As far as I can judge, you have already answered many of the questions. So please try to focus only on those aspects that you haven't touched upon yet. As the purpose of the dissertation was to prove the impact of approaches to personal training and development on the innovation activity of companies in Brazil, Russia, India, and China on the basis of cross-country comparison. And I'm really sorry to use the word purpose in the second chapter of the dissertation. I should have used the word objective there, because that was actually objective. There are some inaccuracies in the wordings and terminology I used. I tried to be consistent, but I failed at times, and really sorry for that. Talking about methodology, qualitative analysis, cluster analysis, fuzzy sets, allowed to solve many of the purposes and objectives. The combination of these methods still allowed to produce quite relevant and accurate results. I didn't consider the homogeneity of variables in my study. It's just a way to further improve my methodology in future research. Innovation active companies of the BRIC countries do not compete directly. However, the environment they are in is indicative of the similarities that they have. It's not only about competitiveness, that's also about export patterns, the use of technologies. We didn't focus on the sectoral specifics yet. I have some limitations when in time. I have to be brief, so I cannot provide a more a deeper reply to your questions. I hope that Professor Smirnych found the answer satisfying during the question and answer question. Now the floor is given to Professor Dirani, and I would like you to be brief if that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Artem, thank you for inviting me to this committee. Let me start by saying a couple of limitations, personal limitations. One is the format of the dissertation is different than what I am familiar with and what I train my students to do. So this is a new approach, but in general, all the steps in a sound research study are present there. So although the chapters are different or the sections are different, the overall approach was there. The second I want to say is some of the specific statements were lost in translation maybe, but again, the general idea, argument were logical and flowed very well. I learned a lot about the topic, about innovation practices, about the theoretical framework, about the methodology that he used. I agree with all the panel or the committee members that there are strengths and weaknesses or limitations. I'm not going to repeat all the strengths because your study is a very complex study, and you tried to capture so many points or research points, but that's why I think the limitations come or the weaknesses come as well. I will speak about three specific points my colleagues did not address, or I would like to highlight them. One, I really like in your introductory chapter or in chapter 1, the innovation definition. I'm giving this as an example, not as a specific critique. So I like the definitions. I would encourage you to have like a chronological approach to innovation. So how it evolved, what did it mean in early years versus now? And you mentioned that you selected one of the, selected your own definition, or you provide a definition. But my question is why? Like, why did you choose that specific definition? I don't want you to answer this, but this is one critique. Like, there are several places where you keep the reader from the why. Like, for me as a reader, I would like to know why you think this is the best definition of innovation, for example, or if you took this definition from the literature, who you took it from and why would you think this supports your dissertation? And this is just one example of not keeping the reader hanging with the why you choose this approach. I think there's a very logical movement or alignment between your theoretical framework, your methodology, and your process. One question about in your methodological approach is I really would like to see, or if you're a reader of this dissertation, one would wonder more about your population and sample and the validity of your data collection process. That might give more validation of your analysis and your results. I didn't see much there. I know it was a big collaboration with professors from different universities, but if you include that here, like the devil lies in the details, but details here are positive, I think, not negative. The third thing that I would like to talk about is your theoretical and practical implications, which are you focus most of these implications towards human resource management approaches, but I didn't see the innovative part in it, or you tackle it in a very like not in detail. Like I would like to, if there's a critique, I would say talk more or write more about the innovative part in your findings, and how would that make an impact on different organizations in different sectors, whether these sectors are country-specific, BRIC countries, or countries in general. I agree with my colleagues also. There are micro-level details that you need to be consistent. Sometimes you mention, like in your methodology chapter, for example, you mention there are 39 countries in India, for example, but then when you do your analysis, you mention only 35 observations or countries. Explain why the other countries were not in part of these analysis, or why the 35 versus the 39. Other than that, I agree with almost everything that my colleagues said, and I'm not going to repeat that. I know you're tired, and everyone is tired by now. So for me, I support your like granting you the. Should I read this statement? Like.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Thus, the dissertation research carried by Artem Alsufyev approaches to personnel training and development of innovation active companies in the BRIC countries, presented for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Economics, meets the qualification requirements for candidate dissertations on specialty 080005 Economics and Management of National Economy. Thank you.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much, Professor Dirani. I'm going to use Russian to answer questions due to the requirements of the meeting. Sure. I would like to thank you for the report you made I tried to be consistent and logical, really, when writing my thesis. I tried to be consistent with the terminology so that this terminology would pin up the logic of my study and create systematic design of my study. However, I do agree that very often I had to provide more explanation to certain aspects, including the definition of the word innovation. Still, all the concepts and frameworks I used, they followed the common logic of the theoretical analysis and the requirements of the empirical research, or discussing the results of the empirical research. About the validity of data collection, it's a huge limitation when it comes to a comparative study. I used the so-called snowball technique to collect data, and it does have certain limitations which I admit. I focused more on human resource management because it's stated as the purpose of my study. However, this huge overview of innovations and innovative activity is done in the first chapter. For example, section 1.3 focuses on approaches to human resource training and how it affects innovation. Section 2.2, this is the analysis of country-specific features of the BRIC countries. And there I write about the ecosystem of innovations in these countries. Innovation activity is the resulting parameter. In different studies, resulting parameters are different, like HR outcomes, organizational performance, financial outcomes. But in my case, I highlighted human resource management, in particular training and development. The number of companies, you're absolutely right. However, still, I tried to be systematic in my approach to writing this thesis. Sometimes there were some inaccuracies. Thank you once again. And now I'd like to take the floor with my report. Let me once again note that all the reports were duly uploaded on the SBU website, so I will be brief. You'll find the complete report on the thesis written by me as a copy on the website of our university. I'm really in favor of the research conducted by the candidate. It's well written, well structured, it's logical. Still, cross-country studies is something that is really crucial for human resource management and practices. We are currently talking about the global job market, huge migration processes, mergers and acquisitions at a global scale. So it really requires a proper understanding of these processes. And the interpretation of data we find in the thesis we're discussing today is really relevant for those who make managerial decisions these days. Another thing that creates value for this study is the conclusion, which is well argumented. Benchmarking or adoption of practices really has many limitations in human resource management, as well as in training and development of personnel management. And this convergence that's due to the context, due to the environment, is really valuable. I share the conclusion made by my colleagues. This study is interesting when it comes to the classification of approaches. It's of huge value for training students on human resource management programs and for further research as well. As for the model developed by the candidate, it's obviously of some value, and that creates vistas for future research. Another thing I liked is the determination of factors which took into account country-specific features. This is also something you can write about in future. Some critical remarks on my part. Page 28 gives a model which I didn't quite understand. There you say, at the input, we have approaches to personnel training and development. However, at the input stage, we always have people. We have people as resources, people who join a company. It's the first question. Could you please provide a brief answer later? The second question here. You characterize a pool of human resource, but you didn't try about the so-called motivational nucleus or kernel, which affects the labor, behavior, and the motivation of employees. Here, I mean research by Yadov and other major Russian scholars. What is the result of personnel behavior in an organization? And how does this result of personnel behavior affect company's performance at any level? This is still page 28 of the Russian text. Then you write that you obtained data from 200 companies. Then you say you used the Oslo manual to conduct your analysis. And here I would like to find out how you used the methods from the Oslo manual. And I would like to hear the explanation. Why this number? Why 200 companies, not 205 or 400 or half a thousand companies? One more remark. You did not provide the data, the questionnaires, the actual answers of those heads and management from these companies. And this compromises the credibility of your study. I haven't seen handwritten questionnaires. Still, this study is a relevant research. It provides a thorough analysis of relevant works by leading international and Russian scholars. It uses interesting and effective methodology and provides results which have practical and theoretical value. So, this is by Artem Alsufyev, Approaches to Personal Training and Development of Innovation Active Companies in the BRIC countries, complies with the major requirements set forth by St. Petersburg State University, specialization 080005, Economics and Management of National Economy. And Artem Alsufyev can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of economics. The candidate has done a good job and can join the community of scholars. I'd like to thank you for your report. Now let me answer the questions. The first one about the pool of human resources. It's an element of the internal organization of a company. The term motivational kernel or nucleus. Here I also used Moyam's concept. He speaks about skills, abilities, and knowledge. And this is the logic we used to speak about training. Results can be different. This can be HR outcomes, this can be social outcomes, how people treat their colleagues, what they think about company culture. We had 7 criteria to use companies. There were 2 limitations for each criterion, and as well as additional criteria. As a sum, there have to be 5 positive criteria so that a company could join the sample. The official discussion is now over. Are there any non-board members here who would like to take the floor? Now the floor is given to the academic advisor of the candidate, Professor Elena Zavyarova. Colleagues, I have been listening to your critical remarks with some interest and attention. And I would say that I share your viewpoints. But this is now, in the year 2018, that I accept them all. However, we started this study 5 years ago. In the year 2012, we couldn't even imagine which challenges we would face when designing and implementing the study. The idea appeared that year, and we just had an interest if innovation-driven companies use the same approaches to personnel training and development, and whether this choice has any impact whatsoever on the innovativeness. We could not predict any result. What we had as an assumption is that these companies use generalist approach. There were many globalist ideas in those days, and on the way to finalize the research, we were able to see drastically different results from what we expected. So that was quite an educational path for us, because we learned much new on the way to complete this thesis. The results we obtained about Russia and India allowed to get an insight into which approaches companies use to improve their performance when it comes to innovations. Talking about the personal characteristics of the candidate, I would call him an honest scholar, because, as far as you can see, he could do whatsoever with the data he gathered. However, he was really open when interpreting the data and very loyal to the research and the results. We are now moving to a very important part of the agenda. This is the discussion of the members of the dissertation board. I would like you to switch off the broadcast, and I would like attendees and non-board members to leave the auditorium. We will try to be quick and
Уважаемые соискатели, уважаемые научные...
We are continuing the panel session of the Dissertation Board. Could you please switch on the broadcast? Make sure that it's on and there are no technical issues. So we have reached the climax of today's session. I put to the vote the issue of conferring the academic degree in conformity with item 23 of the Order on Granting Academic Degrees at St. Petersburg State University. Let me remind you that the decision of the Dissertation Board on conferring the academic degree is positive, provided it has received 50% of the votes from no fewer than 3 members of the Dissertation Board. Professor Grieva, what's your opinion? I'm for. Professor Bagabanova, what's your opinion? I'm for conferring the degree. Professor Smirnych, member of the Dissertation Board, what's your opinion? I'm definitely for conferring the degree. Professor Durrani, member of the Dissertation Board, what's your opinion?
I am definitely for.
И мое мнение я тоже поддерживаю.
I'm also for conferring the degree. So, colleagues and attendees, let me announce that 5 out of 5 board members present at the session of the Dissertation Board have voted for conferring the academic degrees. We don't have any board members who voted against or decided not to vote. So, Artem Alsufyev is awarded the academic degree of the candidate of economics, specialization 080005, economics and management of national economy. Now the floor is given again to the candidate for his closing speech. Distinguished chair of the board and all the members of the Dissertation Board, attendees, I'd like to thank you for the genuine interest to my study, for the discussion, for your recommendations and criticism. This is something I will definitely consider in my future work. My special thank you to the members of the board as well as the chair. I'm thankful for all the comments that you made and the remarks that opened up new vistas for my future research. I'd like to thank St. Petersburg University and the department for organizing defenses, for the chance to defend my dissertation here. I'd like to thank the School of Management, where we discussed preliminary results of my study. The support of my colleagues from the School of Management was invaluable. I'd like to thank my academic supervisor, Professor Zavyalova, for her wonderful guidance. Thanks a lot for the support you provided me with when I needed that on my way to this day. I'm really thankful to all those I turned to for advice. I would also like to thank my family who were not able to be present at the defense in person. I'd like to thank my parents because it's due to them that I try to do my best in whatever I start. I'm thankful to my friends, to my colleagues who have been supporting me. I'd like to thank those who have joined an online broadcast. Thanks a lot to one and all. Artem, thank you. I'm thankful to everyone who has participated in today's session. I would like to thank my colleagues for their patience, especially those who have joined online. Our session is over. Let us switch the broadcast.